When we launched the Market House, we wanted to carve out time to have conversations that were about more than just markets. Major Notes looks at some of the pivotal moments that helped define the lives of some of the best minds in finance and business. In this latest episode, I sat down with Cem Karsan, founder of Kai Volatility. Many of you probably know him as Cem Karsan on X, where he shares his expertise on options and derivatives. But there is so much more to his story, as I found out. From Friday Night Lights to Dead Poets Society, Latin America, Chicago, and a state no one wants to find themselves in, utter grief and loss, Cem's personal journey is nothing short of extraordinary. He shares so much wisdom and humanity. I was profoundly moved by my time with him, and I think you'll be too. Thanks to everyone who's pledged your support to the Market House Substack. It makes conversations like this possible. Enjoy.
June of '05, as I had left and was starting this new business, I was leaning against a railing after a party with a friend, and a railing broke and I fell 4 stories. And I almost died. When an opportunity comes and you feel deep in your heart, mind, and soul that you need to do it, you need to move. And I think people often don't out of fear. I think so many of us are just, what if it doesn't work out? What if the most incredible thing in the world happens and you just miss it? We're having all this success financially, and the business is growing. I mean, in '08, '09, at the peak, more than 13% of the volume of the S&P 500 options, more than 10% of all equity option volume. I had met my future wife. We were getting engaged. There was all this, wild set of things happening, and she was increasingly being like, "You're crazy." Like, slow down. In 2020, the options boom is happening, and I'm sitting at home during COVID, and McKinsey's redeemed, and I'm like, what's next? And I decide to go on, this little jam croissant character gets breathed into existence. And I think what that was, by the way, was this deep-seated desire to do something bigger, to educate and to give back. We just bought a new house, and all the great things were happening, and the kids are growing up and going to schools. And I'm at a conference, and my wife calls me and says, I have this pain in my groin. I can't get out of bed.
Did it feel like just the rug was ripped out from under you?
Shock, right? Like, how can you go from having a life partner who is, so vibrant and so strong and so many ways, like, just so incredible, to just gone in 3 months. It's impossible.
So, hey, Cem, so excited to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, I love it. I think this is, it's an important one. It's kind of fun not to talk markets for a second, really just kind of dig into how it all got started.
Yeah. And I had a feeling it would be fun to do this with you, because every once in a while I see this little philosophical part pop up even in our market conversations. So I think it's going to be really fun to sort of, get to know you in this way. So before we jump in, so we're going to talk about major notes in your life, right? And we have lots of them, but a lot of times there's a sort of sliding door moment, or you really reflect back and you think that changed things for me somehow, which is, why we kind of are, we use this framework is maybe a good way to put it. But before we jump into your major notes, just tell us a little bit about where you grew up and what you were like as a kid. I mean, were you a wild child? Were you introverted?
Yeah, I think some of this will surprise people. So I'll start at the beginning. I was born in London. Don't remember that time. It was very little. And my parents had lived there for 7 years. I think my parents' backgrounds are kind of important. I was born at the very tail end, and my sister, who's 6 years older than me, was born on the front end. So my sister and I had very different experiences, right? Her first 6-7 years were in London, and mine were really, I don't really remember London. My parents are Turkish. Both of them grew up in Turkey and Istanbul for, their college experiences, et cetera. And then my dad, who was valedictorian of his class of the #1 school in Turkey, left and had a Fulbright scholarship, and came to the U.S. For his PhD. in Texas. And so this is before either of us are born, my sister or I. And he gets his PhD in Houston, Texas at Rice University. That's my connection there. It was a long story connecting Rice and our family. And then he moves, it's his first job opportunity working, Houston is the center of the energy industry, right? And so being a PhD structural engineer, he's at the heart of this in the 60s. He's in the heart of this growing industry of offshore oil. And they send him to London. He works for a company called Brown and Root, which at the time was a very, very kind of like the top of that industry. And he talks about his time there as like very incredibly formative. Like he's running their main, like imagine 1968, like they have these mainframe computers. And I still remember, by the way, as a kid, my dad would come home with like the piles of like the cards that would go, like the paper cards that would go into the mainframe computers. Like typical engineer, my dad is like a, really, really kind of mathematically minded, analytical engineer, squared PhD engineer. So, and so he led a lot of that offshore efforts there. He has over 10 to 20 patents in the design of offshore oil platforms. So that was like his
amazing.
And this was kind of a really interesting time. And so anyway, my mom and dad really enjoyed London. Like they still wax poetic about their 6-7 years there. And my sister was born there, et cetera. So then my dad had to go back for his military service to Turkey. And in that process, he kind of got stunted a little bit. It was supposed to be a year at the time. And in Turkey, you were required as a male to do military service to keep your passport. Israel's a similar way. There are a lot of other countries in the world that are similar. And they ended up keeping him for almost 2 years because he was talented and they needed his services. And that, I think, was a frustrating situation. When that was done, he was like ready to go back to London, and they were like, no, we need you in Houston, Texas now. And so he went back to Houston, and that's when I was 1 or so year old, or 2 years old, after Turkey. So I had this very like a London, Turkey, U.S. And so I moved to the U.S. when I'm about 3. And so most of my memory is in Houston, Texas. We had a house with a wonderful pool, and it was a safe neighborhood and in the Memorial area in Houston for people who are from that area. And have just incredible memories with just, friends in the neighborhood on our bikes and running back after school and jumping in the pool and all that stuff.
Quintessential.
Yeah.
They're lovely.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. And my sister was 6 years older. So, I had almost like 2 parents, I would joke. My sister's not, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. She may not love this part, but I think she's a lot like my father in a lot of wonderful ways. She is very bright, like upper level Mensa bright, as is my father. And so, she was always she got a 1600 or 800 on her math part of her SAT, and very close on the verbal, like back when those numbers were a lot harder. She was, again, valedictorian of her class. Everything seemed to come easy. She was like all the things. And so I kind of grew up a little bit in that shadow.
Yeah. And did you not feel like that? Did you not sort of feel like the smart one in the family? I guess when you have that in front of you, it's hard.
Yeah. No, I did not. I felt like which is kind of, again, the part that probably surprises people. And that's part of what drives you too, right? Yeah. I've always had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. I think, I was definitely and boys and girls are different. I don't know if you have.
I have one of each.
Kids are one of each. Yeah. So, I mean, those that have one of each or has experienced either, like they are very different. And my sister was, and I was also, the difference too is I have a little bit of a tendency towards ADHD, right? My sister was super structured and super everything, and I'm trying to do 100 things at once. And I'm as a boy child and all those things I think my parents were like, what is this?
Yeah. What happened?
Like what happened?
Or as I
Like it
say,
was so
how does
easy with this
civilization continue? Like you have a girl
daughter of
first
ours,
and
like
they're so organized, and then the boy is like floating
totally
out, and it's like we all look at each other
100%.
like, what's happening here? But
Exactly.
developmentally
Yeah.
it's different.
We developed like in our late 20s.
Yeah, that's what I'm told. That's what I'm waiting for.
It's very slow.
Question. It's interesting. So I know the first time any of us come across you, we probably all mispronounce your name until we figure it out. Your parents, does your sister also, was it important that your parents gave you a Turkish name? And
so we grew up speaking Turkish at home.
wow.
So even though we were in Houston, Texas, we spoke English as well.
Yeah.
But Turkish was probably more than 50% early on. It eventually changed to speaking more English than Turkish. And now I think we almost 90% speak English to each other. But no, I grew up with both languages, and every summer as a child, the other thing I mentioned, my father, my sister, like my mother, I want to be clear, herself was an engineer, incredibly bright, but starting in London because my dad's career was taking off, she decided to be a stay-at-home mom, and I was incredibly fortunate. I don't think I could say this, with enough exclamation marks, to have a stay-at-home mom that was very thoughtful and bright and caring. And so I had all the things from a very young age. She really is wonderful. So we and I think that is a lot of who I am, is an impact of that love and attention and care. And she's very interested in how the world works, and and I think being from Turkey is this part of the world too, where you can't help but be, it's where everything kind of connects. And so you can't help but think about East, West, policy, economics, all those things. It's like, it's in the water, So I grew up like with that around the dinner table every day, and with my mother all the time as well. It was just I didn't realize how different that was than most people. And so, yeah, again, a lot of my sister's successes and mine are, not that my father wasn't around. He would get home at 7:30 and we'd have dinner, and then, and it was a very traditional kind of family in that regard, at least old school traditional, right?
That's what people did then.
Yeah, totally. And so I grew up in this Turkish family, and for those that don't know, I think most people do, but my Twitter handle is jam_croissant, which is a play on my name, Cem Karsan. But yeah, part of that, the origin of that is right because I grew up as CEM in Texas.
Yeah.
It was my whole life. I've grown up with, first time I meet anybody, it's like, the name.
Well,
right?
It's interesting when parents, I think it's a conscious decision, but it's clear that they wanted that your identity and your background sort of imprinted on you, and to not lose that.
They were very Turkish.
I've talked to other people whose parents said that, and especially a friend of mine's a female, but if you lose your last name, at least this is always part of your identity that you carry with you. So it's interesting.
The culture is very important.
Yeah.
I think it's true for most cultures, definitely in like a Turkey. I think you've probably seen My Big Fat Greek Wedding, like Turkey's the same way. It's like I think there's a quote in there where the dad says, the word kimono is a Greek word. It comes from, he's like, everything started in Greece, right? Like Turkey's the same way. Like, the belief in Turkey is that it's the origins of humanity and all these things.
Yeah.
And so there's this great pride and great, and I think I really relate to, automatically connect with anybody who is first generation, pretty much from every culture. It is such a different experience. It is so hard to describe to people what that is like, particularly if you're like you're a major minority, like a Turkey. There are many Turkish people, in the U.S. And so, you have this micro kind of identity within this bigger society, and you're kind of the other. And so I always relate to the other, right? Like I'm always very, I'm also, and I really have said this before, it took me to my 40s to realize this, but the amount that's played a role in my thinking of the world and being kind of able to be what I think is a rational third party observer, or try to be at least, is a function of being, I mean, I wasn't just Turkish in Turkey. I was like not even Turkish, right? Because I didn't really, like I go to Turkey every summer, by the way, for 3 months. So it wasn't just we spoke the language at home. I would go to Turkey for 3 months in the summer. My mom, because she didn't work, could take us for the 3 months. And my father would just come for 2 weeks at the beginning and 2 weeks at the end. But I spent, my summer 3 months a year, quarter of my life as a child in Turkey with my cousins. Wonderful times, by the way, on the Mediterranean and the beach in Istanbul, like incredible. But I really grew up with this dual cultural and awareness. There's also a school of thought that language defines your rational thought. And when you're particularly in a non-Latin language, there's a theory called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. That was Native Americans here in the U.S. who grew up with a Native American language, which is so different, like in terms of the way they think about the world. They define time differently. There's just so many incredible different like core ways of thinking about the world embedded in the language. So when you grow up with two different languages, your rational thought is really kind of bifurcated almost. You think you understand two different, very different perspectives on rationality itself. And there's a theory, and I think there's a lot of truth to it. I mean, I don't think it's absolute.
It makes sense.
But so people who grow up with these two languages at the same time as mother tongues, it can't be learning a second language on top of the other tongue.
It's where it originates in your brain.
Where it originates. The way you think about the world is very bifurcated, and you have different. And much like you might imagine, if you see the world in two different ways, you also begin to realize, well, there's all these things in between, right? And so the world itself is more kind of open. So I feel like all those things played an incredible role in my how I think, how I see the world. And Texas is also, I love Texas. It's, I lived again there 10 years before I went to college there again, so 14 years total, particularly in Houston. But Texas is particularly in the 70s and 80s is, although Houston's a little different, is not necessarily the most accepting place on the planet. Again, a lot better than it used to be now. But there are, I guess, a lot of intolerant people, and there's a lot of derogatory things about kind of Hispanics and stuff there that I always was just completely kind of, again, I can relate to the other as a function of that. I was fortunate because I didn't look necessarily different, and I could be the other without being the other. And so I got to, very simply move in and out of. But back to my name, is kind of the thing that defined me as the other. Because if I was just Jim, like people probably wouldn't know any different. And so I think it played a very powerful role. It allowed me to also be myself and just different, to live in that third.
Yeah, there's only one.
There's only one. I mean, there's a bunch of us in Turkey, by the way. It's a very common.
It's Jim in Turkey.
It literally is. It's like Jim or John in Turkey. But it is in the U.S. a fairly common name, an uncommon name. So yeah. There's a book called Third Culture Kids that was written in the 70s about this phenomenon too, about people who grow up in another place without really necessarily associating themselves as just American. But they are also stuck because they don't believe that they're Turkish either. So I would look at the people in Texas and be like, these people are kind of, I love that of the culture. Again, I don't want to, I feel it's a big part of me, but I can also look at it and be like, I don't understand a lot of the core beliefs that they have or why they are this way necessarily in certain aspects. And then I would look at my parents equally and just be equally as confused sometimes about their beliefs and the way they thought about things. So what that's done, again, it took me until my 40s to realize it, is it's made me very suspect of conventional wisdom. My moorings, I don't have very firm moorings. And that's actually, I think, a blessing often. It's hard. It was a hard, I had like a existential angst as a child because I was like, who am I? And all you want as a kid is to be like everybody else.
Conform, right? That's
Conform.
your survival tells you that. Yeah, it's difficult as a child, as a kid, but a superpower as you get older and recognize
Absolutely.
it. But it's a journey to get there. It's interesting. That's such a great setup because I feel like there's a little bit of geography that plays into a lot of your major notes. So
Yeah.
let's talk about the first one, and it's luck, which you say was your parents' decision to move out of the country yet again. So why is this so important?
Yeah. So important because I was a square peg in a round hole. The struggles that I had as a child, and by the way, I was a good athlete.
You played football, I think
Played
you told me, right?
football, which was like, again, I think that was so much me wanting to fit in.
Yeah, in
right?
Texas.
In Texas. And in Texas, sports is so important. So I was super fast. That was my kind of like thing. I think I ran a 4.8 40 as like which is not like Olympic or anything like professional level stuff, but like as a middle schooler, high school, like or 8th, 9th grader, that is it's a thing. And I grew fast. I actually, was tall early and definitely wasn't all that big, but I was very kind of fast. And so yeah, I played running back on the football team and started. And in 9th grade, freshman year of high school, I was on the JV football team at a school that's won state championships in Texas many times. And so, by all metrics, if I had stayed there, I would have gone on to play, like starting running back on the varsity football team and all the things in Texas. Friday Night Lights. Yeah, 100%. And so, to give you context, I went to a school called Stratford High School where Andrew Luck went to school as a football player. And, that many people will know Andre Ware. Like these are professional
superstars. Yeah.
Big superstars. Now, I don't think I was built for football. Like you can probably like see me now, like in my full, like I don't have like the physique. Again, I grew early and I think candidly, like I still, I'm glad I didn't play football through high school. I'll tell you that much less college or something. I would have probably had a lot of maladies, but it did help me develop confidence and, I am a natural extrovert, so it made me more social, made me more of a leader in a lot of different ways.
There's a lot of power to that.
Yeah, sports is so important, I think, in different ways there. And I played all kinds of sports. It wasn't just football. I played everything basically under the sun. I did the t-ball and I moved on, played basketball and whatever. I got injured. So 2 things. One, my parents moved. My dad got this offer to move to Oslo, Norway to run what at the time was the largest offshore floating platform, not run, to design and build, which is usually a 4 or 5 year project, this massive platform. And to give you a sense of these offshore platforms, for people who don't know, the 1,000 people live on them in the middle of the ocean. This one was in the North Sea, miles down to get to the oil, swells of 20 to 30
I was going to say not
stories.
hospitable.
Yeah, like incredible. Like these are like feats of engineering that are like akin to like going to space, right? Like and so he had this opportunity to go lead that project from the engineering side in the North Sea in Oslo, and it was very sudden, and I think at the time I remember finding out kind of without my parents telling me. It just kind of happened. It was long, and it was just like World War III. To give you a sense, it's not like I chose to go to prep school or to Andover. This was pure luck. I didn't even know what it was. In Texas, boarding school is like you send the bad kids to boarding school.
Yeah.
It's like
prison camp, the boys' prison camp.
Right. I had no idea. And I was just trying to be, there's a lot of 14, 15-year-old, like just getting comfortable, just getting kind of my feet underneath me, like confidence stuff.
Yeah.
And my parents are now uprooting me from this now again. And so But little did I know that it was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. It's not even a question. I I applied to school. ConocoPhillips, the company my dad worked for at the time, offered to pay for wherever I wanted to go in the world. Um, uh, and my dad was upper middle class, but we weren't like, you know, this wasn't something that probably would have happened otherwise. And my parents really didn't know about it either. It just kind of happened to
Yeah, it
them.
was just like, what are we going to do? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, in retrospect, I've talked to my parents about this. I think they had, like, part of their decision was they thought it would be really good for me too. I think
Mm.
they didn't tell me that till really about 5 years ago or so. I think that was part of their decision. I don't think that was the sole reason he went to. It was a really great opportunity for him. But point being, I ended up at Andover, Phillips Academy, Andover, right outside of Boston, which I don't know if everybody here is familiar with it, but it's a incredible school. There are, I would say, 5 to 10 really kind of elite prep schools in the East Coast of the United States. And what does elite mean? I don't mean it like, oh, they're elite. I mean, they're really exceptional schools that have been around since the 1700s. This Andover was founded in 1778. George Washington trained his troops on the lawn. America the Beautiful was written by a student. Literally, there's a dorm called America House where the student wrote that. Uncle Tom's Cabin was written there by Harriet Beecher Stowe. Like, I could go on. It's just like the history is intertwined with the school. Both Bush presidents went there. There's all kinds of, I could go through all the names of people. It's really
Yeah.
incredible.
I think a lot of us are familiar with it because so many.
Some are. And there's another school called Exeter, Phillips Academy, Exeter.
Yeah.
And these two schools are kind of sister schools and founded by the two family mothers, actually members, an uncle and a nephew. Actually, people think they're brothers, uncle and nephew. And one is in New Hampshire and one is in Massachusetts. But that changed my life because I went from being a square peg in a round hole to a fit. All those, I'd say a half or more of the kids there were third culture kids themselves. People from all over the world who themselves, parents were, either military or for energy or multinational corporations, and really a incredibly diverse. I mean, the school's superpower. I mean, the first thing you think about when you think about a school is like, how are the teachers? How's the subject matter? How's the funding and the facilities? The greatest thing about these kind of elite schools is the pure diversification that happens. You are in these dorms with people from, I think it's 50 countries and 48 states. And not just that, and now the acceptance rate is about 8, 9, 10%. So these kids are all incredibly bright and they really try and get different kids. So it's not just like everybody is a good test taker. It's like people are, prima ballerina. You have the incredible athlete, the incredible mathematician, the kid who, is really into aeronautics, wants to be an astronaut. And like all that stuff is there. And in the dorms 24/7. So I grew up starting at 15, my sophomore through senior year, those 3 years. And a lot of those kids are like brothers and sisters to me. They're still my closest friends. But also a lot of them are a part of me. Like I learned, who I was and adopted a lot of the incredible things that these other kids had in them in that process. So Andover was the luckiest thing that happened to me. It was luck. I mean, me getting in wasn't luck per se. I had worked hard and I was good at a lot of things, but yeah, getting in there. And not everybody feels the same way about that school, by the way. It's not like everybody goes there. I think everybody respects and appreciates the education I got. Not everybody had the greatest. I talked to people, who went there. It's not, I don't want to paint like it's the perfect place on the planet. There's also challenges of being away from home.
You locked in though, like that you recognized when you got there that you felt something that you hadn't felt anywhere else.
No doubt. It was what I needed. It is what it was my kind of community, my home. It became that. And so So yeah, that was incredibly important. And then not only do you learn from the people around you, yes, the subject matter and the education is exceptional. Andover, much like a lot of these other schools, do follow a form of education that's a bit different. You sit around a table and some people call it Harkness. You sit around and you talk about things. It's really, teachers are a guide. They're not really sitting up there telling you everything. They teach, but they allow you to run a lot of the coursework. Like math classes are you going up on the board and showing how you would think to solve a certain problem or a certain thing. And you all
It's
do
empowering.
it. And then you all talk about who did what way. And you work back from there in reverse to, okay, what's the actual formula? And that's math. English, obviously, you're sitting around talking about texts and philosophy and sociology. And then that carries over into the dorms. When I was in Houston, in public school, I was in public school in Texas. And by the way, it's like one of the best public schools in Houston. It was not cool to be smart. It was not cool to be interested in XYZ topics. It's not like you sat around and talked about those things with your friend. It was like sports and girls. Right? Like, it was Friday Night Lights.
Yeah.
I tell people I went from Friday Night Lights to Dead Poets Society. It was quite a change.
As you're describing, that's exactly what we all have in our mind, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's not neither one is as extreme as that, obviously. Both are, but yeah, not that far from the truth. So
that's amazing. So I think this leads nicely into one of your big risks. And again, it has to do with sort of putting yourself in a different environment. And one of the things you talked about was going to South America. So you went back to Texas, I think we know. You went to Rice.
I did go to Rice. So let me back up 2 seconds and just say, during Andover, I was going back to Norway every break, Thanksgiving.
In fact, because that was your home now.
Christmas, right? Like spring break. Summers, we would go for a little bit and then go to Turkey. So my high school experience was just almost a magnification of what was already happening in my life. By the way, I never lived, even though we lived in Texas for, I told you, 10 years, we lived in Ponca City, Oklahoma, the headquarters of ConocoPhillips, a 30,000 person town in the middle. So I lived 4 years in Houston, then 2 years in Ponca City, Oklahoma, then 4 years back in Houston. And so I never really lived anywhere for one time at a time for more than 4 years. And so I went to Andover for 3, and then I went to Rice for 4, and then I moved to Chicago, and I've been here for 26 years. And so I had never lived anywhere until I was literally 21, 22, longer than 4 years.
Were you surprised that you went back to Texas? That sounds like an interesting choice when you have now.
Yeah, it was an interesting choice. And it's one I still kind of wonder, you can't look back. And I mean, obviously I'm a product of where I am, and I don't think I'd be here without that choice either necessarily. I got a very nice scholarship to go to Rice University. And I got into Penn, Cornell, Brown, a bunch of other East Coast, more kind of Ivy League type schools. But none of them, I didn't get a scholarship to any of those schools. And I really liked Penn. I thought it would have been, a good fit. And I was interested in finance and stuff like that. So, but the more I thought about it, and my parents did this thing, and they didn't tell me I had to go to Rice or anything like that. Rice is a wonderful school. But they, they said, look, we have this money saved for your college education. It's up to you. Wherever you choose, this money is yours. And that's a pretty powerful thing for a kid, is, a couple $100,000 basically.
Yeah.
And I think that's great in some ways. They let me decide. And that changed the course of where I ended up going to, because I had this money given to me as an 18-year-old, and that was 1995. And in 1995, those that are a student of history know that markets did a hockey stick. And from 95 to 2000 was the best 5-year period in markets, maybe ever.
And you were invested?
Yeah. Yeah, and I
So
started
you were
trade.
already, so you already knew that you wanted to do finance. That was,
No, definitely
oh,
not. Definitely not.
but you
I
were
knew
playing
that
with
I
one.
was really interested. My deep love was, which got accentuated when I was at Andover, was policy, economics, politics,
No.
you know, broadly, social science, philosophy, sociology. Um, but I also was very good at math, and so I actually went to Rice because the other reason it made sense for me is that there are two things there. One, it was incredible engineering school. It has a great reputation as like something like a more of an MIT or Caltech, while still having a liberal arts, kind of healthy liberal arts side. They had the James A. Baker Policy Institute as well there. So for me, I was like, I actually got, the other thing I was looking at was Georgetown. I got into school of foreign service, and it was just too much of a commitment. I couldn't put myself to go there. And this was kind of, I had both. And so I actually started studying some engineering, was like, okay, maybe I'm going to be an engineer, not sure. Took some like policy and other classes as well. And it was the investing, it was the money that I received at 18 that I started playing with. Well, not playing with, investing, that really drove this increasing as I started to make money and play in markets, meet with other kids who were interested in this at Rice. That really sparked the, hey, this is the best connection. I don't think I explicitly understood that at the time, between math, my skills from a mathematical perspective and analytical perspective, with policy, economics, sociology, all the things.
So talk to me about South America.
So, um, my after my sophomore year of high school, I went to Spain for the summer. My parents, in retrospect, my son will be there in a year, and I'm like, what were they thinking? But the reality is, I had lived at different places every 4 years, lived all over the world, so I was more independent, probably confident in doing those things, and I was taking Spanish as my third language, and I was like, look, I want to go to Spain for a month or a month and a half. So I think it was a 6-week program. And so while my parents were in Norway that summer, or then eventually in Turkey, I went to Spain and fell in love with Spanish. Had an incredible, at 15, 16, just the same. I was hanging out with all these 18 to 21-year-olds, and I having all this crazy fun on my own in Spain. And just fell in love with like the Latin kind of culture in general, and became fluent in Spanish pretty quickly. And so in college, fast forward, my junior year, I go to have an opportunity. I knew I wanted to study abroad, and South America was just super high on my list. I had developed a deep love for also nature. One thing I didn't mention is I was an Eagle Scout growing up. I was really involved in like outdoors. I loved rock climbing and all these other things as well. And that was before I went to Andover. And then at Andover, there's all these clubs and amazing outdoors there. And so I did a lot of that there too. And so I just had really fostered this deep love of nature, and South America was just the great kind of wild. I wanted to go out there and to give people a picture, I had long hair in college, like a different world, different person, different, like a kind of different time. And I was like, I want to go to South America. So Chile, which is one of the most beautiful countries on the planet, I had a program there in Santiago. And so I went down there, and actually went down summer before and traveled a bit, and then started school. And halfway, or I think just like 55% of the way through the semester, there were riots at the school. People are very politically involved in South America, particularly the youth. And people may know the history of Chile. We probably don't have the time to cover these things, but there was a leader named Pinochet who was actually backed by the U.S., but had some very almost like fascist, like very like brutal. Like now we know that he at the time was taking out like thousands of people in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, just dropping in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, stuff like that, horrible stuff. But he rewrote the Constitution in Chile at the time to make himself, after being a dictator, a lifetime senator. So he would still have some say, or some protections or whatever. And in there, in the kind of little, fine print, it says no senators while in office will ever be prosecuted for their crimes. So he was still up at his advanced age at that point, when I was down there, a lifetime senator. And basically the groundswell of, hey, this needs to be fixed, from the student body had become a big deal. And so like a lot of the kids that I become friends with there during the semester that were Chilean were like tapping me on the shoulder, like, no, you know, you don't want to come here tomorrow. Like they're going to be riots. And sure enough, I came and I'm like, well, I want to see this. And it's like Molotov cocktails and tanks, and they shut down the school. And I had like all of a sudden 2 months to just kind of travel. And so I traveled around, went to Peru and Bolivia, and, climbed the Inca Trail and to the, La Paz and the salt flats, in Bolivia, and went down to Patagonia and climbed, Torres del Paine National Park and all of the wonderful things. And I met a girl in Chile during the time, as one does. We hit it off, and I was having such an incredible time. Literally a week or two before I was supposed to come back to school, I called my parents and said, I'm not coming back to Rice next semester. I didn't get the full, my excuse was I didn't get the full semester experience. I mean, come on. My parents were like, over our dead bodies, we're not paying for you to gallivant around South America. And I had, to put this in context, this was tech bubble days, right? 97. And I was working for a Rice startup, as a Windows NT administrator, which I probably didn't know really what I was doing. But a friend of mine had started, and I worked, for a year and a half, 2 years doing that. And I'd saved a bunch of money on the side as well, not to mention the money they'd given me, I invested and made a bunch of money on because the bull market. And I said, well, I'll pay for it. And they were like, what are they going to say? So I did it. And I stayed another semester, and it was incredible. I was really fully like dreaming in Spanish, like living as a Chilean, in South America at that point, surfing and, the Chilean coast with, all this pretty wild stuff. And when that was done, I went to Buenos Aires and lived there for a month and a half, at the end of the summer. And in between breaks, also traveled all over, but really saw most of South America, except for like kind of that northern rim at the time, and really fell in love with South America. I thought for sure, like 100%, I was going to get a job and live in South America the rest of my life.
Yeah. Are you surprised you made it back? Because it sounds like that was almost a permanent.
Nothing surprises me anymore. I've lived like 100 lives. I feel like but what all of this taught me, it's kind of a momentum thing. The more you realize, first of all, it was like I moved every 4 years, so I'd become comfortable enough with change and knew that change was often a positive when I didn't expect a positive. I think the Andover thing was a great example for me. Like, well, sometimes you just need to jump. And so it taught me very young to just be willing to be open to anything and to jump at any moment if it was the right opportunity or right thing. To really also listen to myself and hear, okay, is this something that I can take a fork here and do? So, which, by the way, not only led to me going to South America and then being willing to also say, you know what, I need to stay here for this is important, but also eventually what led me to Chicago, because, coming out, I had many opportunities, different types of opportunities coming out of college. And this was just such a exceptionally like foreign kind of wild opportunity to come down and trade on the trading floor of the Chicago Board Options Exchange, or the S&P 500 bit, in 1998, during this wild tech bubble run. And so, yeah, I thought I was going back down to South America. I went back to finish my senior year and to do see all the old friends and reconnect. And during that year, you're applying to jobs, and I started looking at jobs, and like it wasn't much in South America. And the opportunities I was getting elsewhere were significant. And And so I said, well, maybe I'll learn here and then I'll go to South America.
I'll
Because you
just
don't want to just go there without that expertise, but I'll gain expertise here. And I get a lot of good advice saying, yeah, it's probably a good idea. And the rest is history. So I came out to Chicago. And by the way, I had several investment banking opportunities, really great opportunities in New York and in Houston. And I was very interested in capital markets. I had already taken derivatives classes, was really interested in options. And there was a gentleman who had come from Rice, about 8 years my senior, who had gone out and worked for a group called O'Connor and Associates, who was like the OGs in options market making from the 70s and 80s. Well, like the biggest, most dominant, most advanced firm in that, who eventually split off and a bunch of people went off and started all these other major market making groups all over. So most of the major market making groups have their roots in O'Connor and Associates. So these guys, one of these guys was there. He had another partner who had gone to Harvard, and they started their own market making group, and then was backed by the Royal Bank of Canada, and eventually became an arm of the Royal Bank of Canada. And he came back to Rice to hire people at Rice. And so I got this wild opportunity, totally different than anything else coming across at Rice. And it was just so cool, so exciting, so different. And I had no idea, it was scary, right? But I just knew that if I threw myself into that I would learn so much and be such an incredible experience. And I had kind of become like this collector of experiences, I was driven to, I'd lived such an incredible life at the age of 21, right? That I was just like, what's next?
Yeah. It sounds like you were kind of, because of those experiences, fearless. I mean, you were not.
Yeah. I don't think fearless is right, because fearless would insinuate that I have no healthy sense of fear.
Yeah, I was thinking it's a strong word, but you jump.
Yes. When you think about fear, I try not to worry about the emotion as much as be very analytical about it as much as I can. And I'm driven towards, I have a theory, which I won't get into great detail, is the worst thing in life is to get stuck. I don't know that I knew that fully at the time. I think it deep down in my soul, I think I knew it, but you, when an opportunity comes and you feel deep in your heart, mind, and soul that you need to do it, you need to move. And I think people often don't out of fear. I think so many of us are just, we don't, what if it doesn't work out? What if? What if the most incredible thing in the world happens and you just miss it? So I've always, not always, but as a result of those set of experiences, I definitely had that, I think, intuition. And I knew that I was young, and what's the worst thing that happened? The worst thing that happens, it doesn't work out. So that.
And was that the sort of same process when you decided to go out on your own? That same, let's try it. What's the worst that could happen?
Absolutely. 100%. And again, I don't think the world I don't think I'd had enough of the negative side of being so seeking up until that point. I still think at my point in my life, I've had so many more positive than negative that it's allowed me to continue to see that. But yeah, I mean, I guess willing to take the risk was definitely a huge part of all this.
So I'm super curious with that sort of, because that builds so much muscle, right? When you take a chance or take a risk, or you have all this change and you learn how to adapt to that, you have this amazing sort of, I think, resilience. So how did you deal with failure when it came up? And you've got some really powerful ones. But you certainly failed at business.
Mm-hmm.
What did that feel like?
So I'll be honest, until I was 20, God, how old was I at? Call it 20, until let's say 05. I was 28. I hadn't really failed. I mean, I had plenty of challenges, right? Like Houston and kind of the stuff there I was mentioning, and the challenges, and a lot of existential angst, and got my sister and expectations and all those things, which were kind of a driver as well underneath the surface. Um, by the way, I wasn't like number one in my class at Andover. I was in probably the top third, but there's so many brilliant kids, and I was always like, I got a chip on my shoulder. It took me a while to realize when I got out of college that I was actually smart. I'll be candid. I
So
mean, I
sweet.
really like, like,
You're like, wait a minute.
yeah. I mean,
Compared to
you
the
just
rest
live
of the
this
population.
world where you grow up in this kind of upper level Mensa family as like the second child, and then you go to Andover and you're surrounded by all these incredible people, and then you go to Rice and same thing, and it's like you step out in the world, and it really took me a while to realize like, wow, I can do things. I'm good at these things, and um, uh, so I think I had still a building of confidence, and from that perspective, that really happened. I also had it at the same time, even though I hadn't been like humbled fully. Like I definitely had some humbling kind of upbringings. Um, but I was definitely so I back up here when I started. Incredible time to start in the options marketing space, right? Like 1998, 99, top of the tech bubble, 2000, that run, like incredible education, like way to start in the business. And then 2000, 2001, 2002. I mean, the first, you know, 5 years were just incredible, some of the best in the vol space. And I learned so much about how markets work. And I mean, it was, again, there could be a whole show on just that, right?
Yeah.
And I was confident. I was good at what I did. I had an opportunity because some people left and started another firm. And literally 2000, like 2 years after I was there, not even at the beginning of 2000, right before the tech bubble burst, like I became one of the head traders for the group. And eventually during that next year or so, the head of all equity index law at the group at the Royal Bank of Canada, grew tremendously, made a ton of money during that time. And I went from being like, wow, look how much they're paying me, to like, wait, why am I making X percentage of all this money that they're making? And it's just natural. And I had developed the confidence and the probably overconfidence, candidly, but developed a lot of confidence in what I could do. And so I went off on my own in 05 with a partner. And again, I hadn't had a major event in life that had been truly humbling and kind of knocked me back down yet. And in June of 05, as I had left and was starting this new business, I was, leaning against a railing after a party with a friend, and a railing broke, and I fell 4 stories, and I almost died. I mean, I would say almost died. That's probably not fair. The odds are very high falling for 4 stories that you do die. I think that the stats are 50% of people from that height that die, and the 50% of the people who do survive have some form of permanent disability, meaning brain damage, loss of a limb, yada, yada, paralysis, yada yada. And so, 1 in 4 that I am here this way now. I also fell with somebody else who also had similar, a girl who had similar types, but similar injuries in so many ways that I did. And, but we both came out of it.
Amazing.
Okay. And, but as you might imagine, I had like an external fixator on my leg. I had like shattered my shoulder blade, like herniated disc in my neck, all kinds of stuff that I still, things that I still deal with. But so fortunate to, and that gave me an even greater kind of, oh my gosh, like life is so precious. I always kind of felt that, like these deep philosophical roots and this, but just that it's hard to express. Like once you go through that, it's almost like a new lease on life.
Yeah.
And so it humbled me in some ways, but B, and I had a little bit of PTSD and stuff from that, and which kind of also probably kind of reined me in a little bit.
Yeah.
And as that was happening, the new business like didn't succeed. Probably to a great extent because I wasn't as involved. Probably to the extent that I was involved, like emotionally, not who I probably was months prior. And And so my partner at the time and I parted ways after about a year. It was a very difficult year and a half, 2 years. Kind of felt a little lost. What am I doing? And, yeah, about 2 years into it, about '07, I guess it was, or '07, I said, look, I'm going to give it another shot, but on my own. I found some other people who wanted to join me as more employees and junior partners. And by the way, that part of the story is the one I don't tell that much. I probably should tell it more, but it's like a year or two. It's kind of a weird part of the story. But there was this couple year real failure and just existential crisis, of, who am I? Where am I going? I didn't have any family in Chicago. I was also a solo in Chicago. I got out to Chicago completely on my own. But I had, made enough money and was in a situation to kind of back us. I found another outside backer to kind of get money behind my money, and was off and running on my own.
How did you get the courage to sort of swing again? Because especially when you haven't encountered a lot of failure, if you have a massive one like that, and for some people, it spooks them. That's it.
Yeah, Maggie, I think a lot of it is just all that stuff. I was fortunate to have all that built up over all those years.
So you had a reserve.
I had a reserve.
Mm.
But I was, I also, what was my other option? To give up. Right? To just, what was I going to do? I guess I could have gone back to South America. That was something that did cross my mind. But no, I dug in, and great. Again, I guess this could have been the luck part as well. I do feel fortunate. This is the thing that people talk about. It's yeah, luck, variance, it matters, but success to a great extent is persistence. And if you're persistent enough, luck happens. So I got lucky. '08 happened, and we had just built up in '07, and we grew incredibly quickly. And I was aggressive. Risk seeking to some extent. I'm sure the accident and you only live once, the YOLO attitude, right?
Yeah.
Was there. And, we were winning 9 out of 10 days, and I was just pedal to metal.
Right. But when you've had a failure as well, the alternative. And so that it's often the case that I think we find that fuels it. I'm really curious about the other failures you put on, though, because I think that, when we have a business failure, we learn from it, and then we sort of, use that as a springboard. And it's often the lessons from that fuel the ultimate success, like you said.
Yep.
This other failure, though, around that's just so hard. So talk about that.
So basically, as we're having all this success financially and the business is growing, we were in '08, '09, at the peak, more than 13% of the volume of the S&P 500 options, more than 10% of all equity option volume. Different time, the volumes weren't as big, and it wasn't, but kind of crazy numbers. The people we were toe to toe with in terms of volume, like Susquehanna, were 10 times our size, maybe bigger, in terms of capital and people and infrastructure.
You're killing it. It's killing it.
Yeah. It's just there was so much opportunity, and I was just we had a really good set of quantitative models and a great team, but we didn't have the technology and infrastructure to compete. Really, the reality is when bid-ask spreads are like this, it's who's willing to take risk here is what matters. But when bid-ask spreads go like this, it's who has the better infrastructure and technology is what matters. So, and that's part of the story, by the way, why in 2010 I exited the business. So, because we were doing great, but as things slowed down, the opportunities diminished, and it became clear that I had assets and opportunity to, at a right time, to kind of transition out. But to answer your question about, while that was going on, I had met my wife, future wife. We were getting engaged. There was all this, wild set of things happening, and she was increasingly being you're crazy. Like, slow down. Like, and I think in 2009, 2010, a big part of the also exiting the business was her being very clear, like, hey, we're going to have a family. You don't need to do this like this anymore. And so I think that was really healthy and the right time, right person, right place, everything. And so I sold the business in 2010. We got married, had a son in 2011. We didn't waste much time. We knew that's kind of what we wanted, and traveled and had some, wonderful times. The person who had introduced me to her was my great friend from Andover, a Turkish guy who grew up in Canada. So very similar. Like, you can imagine the connection there. But like myself, like, he wasn't born in Turkey. He grew up in Canada, had Turkish parents. So this very shared. He lived in Chicago. He's a physician. He's a cardiologist, interventional cardiologist, really bright, amazing guy named Ada Erdogan. And, I had a boat on Lake Michigan, we had lots of fun at the time too. And he was always out on the boat, with me and all of our friends and everything on the weekends, and a really wonderful time, crushing it. Business is going well. And this is like 09, 08, 09. And he would bring kind of some girls he knew from the hospital to the boat, and this and that. And one day it was my wife, Rohini, who is a physician, pulmonary critical care, incredible woman, in the sense that, beautiful, brilliant, killer, just had her shit together. I don't know if I could say that on here. Had her stuff together.
You can.
And
doing good work too.
Doing great work.
Good work. Yeah.
Great family, all the things. And really just respected her tremendously. And that was something that paired with the, attraction and all the other things was just like perfect. And
was it like right away? Like as soon as you met her, you're like, boom.
I think some ways it was. I think, it wasn't, I don't know. It's hard to describe it. Sometimes it's, I think the respect part, which came a little bit with time, was what really solidified it. But I was definitely attracted to her from the very beginning. Anyway, so we hit it off very quickly, got married, etc. And Ada, the person who introduced us, was our dear friend. And as I'm selling the business and we're getting prepared to get married, we're engaged, we find out Ada has cancer. Pulmonary cancer, lung cancer. My wife's a pulmonologist.
Oh my God.
He's never smoked a cigarette in his life. None of those, there was no warning signs. Not like it's something he did, just incredibly, and a really bad form of lung cancer. He had like a 1-year prognosis for living and lived for like 4 years. So outlived it, but it was an incredibly difficult journey as his close and dear friend. And I held his hand as he passed away with his family. I was one of the few people there with him when he passed. And that was incredibly difficult. Apologies.
No.
I knew there could be tears at this part, but the reality is, it's literally my best friend, and to lose him was incredibly difficult. And my wife and I, she was very good friends with him as well.
Yeah.
And so my daughter actually I gave my daughter his name as her middle name. And so he was just like this important part for me going forward from there. And again, after the accident and losing him, it's like life is short.
Right. But you also realize you have money and you have the knowledge when your wife is an expert in this area and you still can't do anything. And I think that's the hardest thing to come to terms with.
There's nothing else we could have done. There's nothing else he could have done. I mean, the guy he was himself a cardiologist and incredibly connected and did all the things. It's just and I thought, wow, what else? What else could possibly happen? you know. But yeah, wonderful time with new kids and raising the kids and all those experiences. And I was just running a small family office and learning my way around investing, which is very different necessarily than trading and market making. But I had a very different approach to all of that based on my experience and the way I saw the world. And um, And so I kind of was doing that. She had finished residency and had started attending. And so I wasn't like a stay-at-home dad, but I was much more with the kids because I could work from home and do other things. And after, from that was like 2011 till 2016 or so, or about 4 years. And then as we brought people in to manage different strategies and work with other teammates to kind of build this investment thing that I can't find here or there, eventually we ended up realizing that, okay, we had this great track record on these strategies. Maybe we should go find some outside capital. And really the team was kind of coming to me being like, well, we're only managing X tens of millions. Why aren't we could do this for hundreds of millions.
No.
Why don't we do this? And as this is all going, and I'm starting to kind of like the new trajectory to where my next thing is, and the kids are getting a little bit older, so no longer need so much. I mean, they're still young, but different chapter. I started heading off and managing capital for McKinsey, this investment office for McKinsey, which and that was an incredible kind of new journey, managing capital for outside people in a different way, something in new education, a new way to do things. And so as that's happening, things are starting to grow and build, all the way from really late 16 to 2020. That's our experience. And the kids are getting older and I'm growing this new, managing the money still, but also now managing some outside money just for this one entity, no investor relations, no, marketing, nothing, just managing this one account, like a $300 million, $250 million account for Kinsey. And as that starts to happen, then COVID hits, and we actually do incredibly well during COVID. We have a long vol lean, and that's part of why I have this in this portfolio, because it's non-correlated. These are a lot of the principles that I follow and that I do in my portfolio, and that's part of what the payoff was. And we had, I think, 75% in that 1 month during COVID for them on a very big account. So, but a lot of stress out there. They had a lot of stress. I can't really get into all the details, but they end up redeeming, and then everybody kind of looks at each other. It's COVID, and we're kind of look at each other probably over Zoom. And like, what are we doing? And so for about a year there was a lot of, where are we going? What are we doing next? We had a nice payout and all the things based on the investment. But like, what are we doing? And the team had grown. And so the team is also, during COVID, they're trying to figure out what their next move is, or is this still going on? What are we doing? And that's when we launched high volatility and the funds and whatnot. And so things are starting to grow there. That's in 21. And I'm going down this new journey. It's exciting. We've raised money for these funds. Also, importantly, in 2020, the options boom is happening. And I'm sitting at home during COVID, and McKinsey's redeemed. And I'm like, what's next? And I decide to go on, this little jam croissant character gets breathed into existence. And I think what that was, by the way, was this deep-seated desire to do something bigger, to educate and to give back. And I think options had changed so much. It was becoming such a bigger thing. And I just felt this great need to kind of reach out and educate and connect. I think a lot of us need to connect during COVID. And when people realized who I was and what my background was, and I actually knew what I was talking about, I kind of like lit fire in 2020, 2021. And I just, the more that education part, and there's an incredible feedback loop of just, wow, like all these people are teaching all these people, and it's positive, like I'm helping these people in this way and that way. It really, people asked me, it was like, did I have like a plan or some intention to do it? No, it was just completely natural and organic. I was just interested, and I wanted to educate and wanted to kind of connect in this space more broadly. And it was really an incredible kind of culmination of also my recent investing experience and how I built my portfolio and that love for macro and that kid that kind of grew up living all over the place.
Yeah.
I
All the
get to,
threads coming together.
I think about wisdom as like people think, oh, you learn this and this and this, and then you become wise. No, it's like you learn these things and over time they just start merging. And so
Yeah.
like I feel so fortunate in my 40s that all of this has just really come together. And that process of educating and talking to others and interviewing others and being interviewed by others, all of this has been incredibly, I found who I am. Like a lot of this stuff, like I'm talking about now, like I'm now aware of. But if you had this interview with me, like literally 5 years ago, I would not be the same interview at all. I've become so much more kind of aware of how I got here. I find it so interesting how all of our paths lead us to where we are and how critical they are, and how that also gives us an ability to affect the world and to make an impact. So anyway, so that all happened, and Kai Volatility was born, and I was growing, and all the things that most of the public now knows, which really just started at this point, at 2020, 21 in the story. It was just very exciting, and I really felt like I finally found exactly what I want to do. Like everything about what I do right now, by the way, I could not be happier. I love doing every little bit of what I do. I feel so fortunate to have found exactly where I belong finally. But as this was all happening in November of 22, when, by the way, we just bought a new house, and all the great things were happening, and the kids are growing up and going to great schools. And I'm at a conference, and my wife calls me and says, I have this pain in my groin. I can't get out of bed. And I won't get into all the details of everything, kind of how it originated, because there were some clues before, which I wish we caught. And, but yeah, she has to go to the emergency room. I fly back, emergently to meet her, and she gets diagnosed with at the time they don't actually know if it's cancer or not, but they think there's a decent chance. We were very hopeful that it wasn't, and then eventually gets diagnosed with a really, really aggressive form of sarcoma. It's actually called epithelioid sarcoma. About, I think, 0.5% of all sarcoma is epithelioid, and it is the only form of sarcoma that will go through the lymph gland, so it spreads very quickly. And because it's so rare, they don't really have any treatments or anything you can do. When she got diagnosed, we were optimistic that she would have a year or maybe two. And again, given my experience with my friend Ada, I was hopeful we'd have more. And 3 months later, she passed away in February of 2023. So,
did it feel like just the rug was ripped out from under you?
I mean, shock, right? Like, how can you go from having a life partner who is, so vibrant and so strong and so many ways, like, just so incredible, to just gone in 3 months? It's impossible.
I remember I think you at some point, because you're kind of a public figure now, right? And I remember you had been coming on, we had been doing interviews, and you posted something on Twitter, and I mean, I don't even know you well, and it felt like someone punched me in the gut when I read that, and I think we all felt that for you, because it seemed unbelievable. Like, we know you're young, we know you had a family, and it felt like it wasn't real to us. I can't even fathom.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm very fortunate to There are people who go through these things every day that don't have the resources, that don't have all that strength build up, all that reserve, the network, the support, the family. And same applies for my kids. They had all of these wonderful things. So, yeah, I mean, we've navigated it. It's been almost 3 years. I will say, like, there is, it doesn't, for people who haven't gone through it, like, you can never, like, get over it or get used to it, or it just becomes a part of you and you get more comfortable with it.
What has helped you? I mean, this is, thank you for talking about this, first of all. It's so hard.
Of
But
course.
I feel like with other failures, you can look back and say, like, I learned this and I couldn't have the success without the failure. And it's sort of like, this doesn't seem like that kind of failure. This doesn't seem like,
Oh.
I mean, it's so difficult.
There are a lot of sub failures right along the way.
Yeah,
I mean,
like,
when this
exactly.
happens, you can't help but, I mean, you can't help but look back at everything you ever did in that relationship or with your friend or with your wife, and just say, man, I wish or, because you can't. But you also say, man, I'm glad I did X.
Yeah.
And so
what helped you in the grieving process? Was there something that helped you?
Time.
Yeah.
I will say, like, there are a few people who've just been there, who show up. I think people talk to me about this at one point, like when hard things happen, right? A lot of people disappear and some people show up, and often it's not the people you expect.
That's what people say.
I will say several people really have shown up. And so that's a big part of it, learning to be okay with asking for help. And it's humbling. It's just something that is, I mean, I'm a single father with 2, young kids and running 3 businesses and, doing a gazillion other things I could get into. Yeah, I mean, the first year I also was just, I took a lot of time and, trying to give myself grace. I think, I never realized that passing of my friend Ada would prepare me somewhat for this. I don't know if I could have handled this if I hadn't gone through that already.
Yeah. It's not the kind of experience you want, but it's the kind you need.
No. But I also did, I think in the back of my mind, always deep down somewhere, knew that, this too shall pass. Again, because I'd been through other things and ups and downs, and had kind of developed some level of resilience. But we're still working through it. It's not like like everything's normal, or, and what is normal anyway, but like it's I launched my son. He's went off to Andover this year, and he's a freshman there, and so proud of him, but also so proud that we've navigated that together. He seems like he's in a really great spot. They've had their challenges, as you might imagine, and they're going to continue to have them, not just tied to this, but, and in general, it's hard.
Oh, it changes their life.
Yeah. But, this is his story and their story, and they will build their own resilience and their own, and again, much like the other, I look back to that kid that really just wasn't all that happy. I had a lot of existential angst, didn't fit in. And, often our greatest challenges are what drive us and allow us to be who we are. So, I think they'll be great. And we're there for each other, candidly, my kids and I. It's something like this brings you close. to say the least.
Yeah. I think that at least in this situation now, I mean, people are talking about grief a lot more. I don't know if you've seen anything Andrew Garfield has said about it. Um, I recommend to go check it out. He has some wonderful interviews. And Anderson Cooper's doing a podcast all about grief, and
Check
his
it out.
lifelong ability to face it. And I think he did a discussion with Andrew Garfield, and
I have to
he
check
he
that out.
has a
That sounds
wonderful
amazing.
way of he has a wonderful way of framing it that might be really helpful for your kids.
No,
It's really connected in love, you know.
yeah,
So
I appreciate that. Yeah, but again, just another big chapter on, and I think where this leaves me is, I mean, to take that all together, first of all, I mean, both in its pain and its beauty, like life is amazing. Um, and there's so many opportunities, but I also feel a deep, and I have felt this even before my accident and the death of my friend and the death of my wife. Um, but I feel just a deep responsibility to make an impact and to help and to leave, some positive impact on the world around me, for myself and for them. And I feel so fortunate to be able to. I do feel a sense of responsibility. I feel so thankful, so grateful for all that I've had, even the difficult parts. Um, I genuinely feel that. And I just feel like there's such and I have such an awesome opportunity to make an impact and help people that very few people get to. So that's really what drives me. That's what like excites me. And again, feel so fortunate to be here at this kind of juncture in my life.
I love that that's your joy right now. I mean, that's your note of joy, is that, through that pain and everything you've gone through, that you're able to identify that as a note of joy and to be able to lean into the opportunities you see around there. I want to close with regret. I'm going to go backwards because I think your joy is right now, which I love. But I think this is interesting for people because you said something about like you were afraid to be yourself and do what you love out of fear. And from everything you said, it doesn't sound like you're a fearful person. We established that you tended to sort of embrace the unknown, and but you got stuck. And
Yeah,
I feel like people, I mean, it's important to know that you're in a joyful moment now, but I think there are a lot of people out there who are stuck. I mean, we kind of know that people
totally.
feel alone, they feel stuck, they feel like they're not successful. I don't know about you, but we have had just a rash of suicides that my children have had to hear about, like parents, their friends' parents, and like people are not okay. So what is can you talk to me about that regret of getting stuck and then how you kind of got your way through that?
Absolutely. I love that you're digging in and highlighting that. It's so important. So I mentioned how, like, I sold the business in 2010 and 11 and got married. And then we had some young kids and I started investing kind of our money, like as a family office, but I really didn't know what was next. And I was really kind of lost during that time. My wife was finishing a residency, starting as attending. It made sense for me to go to this place and just take my time. And for a year or two, that made sense, right? But I really, until the McKinsey stuff came along and we ended up investing money on that for them, and then eventually building that into another business, I really didn't know where I was going, and I felt completely lost.
Mm.
I had also like this incredible momentum on all these different things, and then just to stop was just like, wait a second, like this doesn't feel right. And so I think I had more than most this impulse to like, and this ability to not fear and to keep going. I had the resources and ability, but partially because I think I had that accident and And I think that kind of humbled me in some ways, made me feel my humanity and the risk. Also having kids does
Yeah.
that. But had
Does
more,
it ever?
I just had more responsibility and people I was beholden to, importantly, to my wife, um, to my kids. I just, um, and so I just got stuck. I just felt like, you know, I'm going to keep trying to make this work and do this way because I'm supposed to, or this is the right thing to do right now. And it really lasted, call it 6 years. Like it was a while. And I think I lost a lot of my confidence at the time. Not all relative, like it's not like but I just didn't know, again, I didn't know who wanted what I had to offer, who would benefit from it. I, I didn't really want to do like my image of what wealth advisory or asset management was also kind of skewed.
Mm.
All these things, I didn't know what I should be doing. And I felt like the things that I thought I might want to do, I was too scared to jump and do because I just felt like it was too foreign. And again, because of I thought the risk, again, I thought other people wanted me to do certain things and I felt like I should be doing those things. There's a lot of just not listening to myself. And making excuses for why I shouldn't listen to myself. Right.
Boy, that's easy to do, isn't it?
So easy. And I'm really lucky, honestly, that I kind of found my way out of that. I mean, those were important years, right? 2011, I was, 34. It was like 34 to 40. And, these are important, critical years where I could be doing a lot and, really making it. And again, very fortunate to have found my way out of it. And some of that is a function of still looking and still having that drive. And like at some point it just wasn't enough and it was never going to be enough. And I had to like break out. I'm fortunate to have that. I think so it overcame whatever fear or feeling of people's other expectations. But I had to go through some kind of not so great, like self-talk and not so great kind of, it wasn't great. I mean, I am glad I got that time with the kids and so much one-on-one time, but I feel like I could have been doing a lot of that and really following my heart, what I really wanted and have now luckily found. But I do think that's very common. And so I have a general philosophy that I've kind of come to really in the last several years that, some people really believe in fate, right? I don't really believe in fate. That's not I feel like I believe in statistics, and not nearly as magical, but I think it is magical in a sense. I think the reality is if we live long enough, everybody would end up where they belong. There's a culmination of what you experience at a young age, of who you are in your DNA, that culminates in a general place that you probably would most be happy and most excel at, and certain things that you would and we're drawn to those things. Like naturally, there's like this magnetism towards where we belong, or we'll be at flow and just our true selves. And when you find those things, you get into that, and it just takes you with it, right? So I think we all have a general place, an area we belong in life. That's not just career, but that's also it's all of it, right? And I think the biggest problem is getting stuck because we don't live forever. And I think what leads to some of the greatest unhappiness for people in the long run is not finding where you belong. And generally that happens because you're too scared to keep trying and to keep moving and to be willing to be open to the risks. Nothing to fear but fear itself. Truly, I really believe that. And we can be our own worst enemies more than anything. I don't think the world holds you back nearly as much as we often hold ourselves back. And I think I've been fortunate to learn that through my life. I think these most recent chapters have been really a case in point to that. And that's really hard to do. By no means is that easy. And the constraints, I was fortunate enough to be able to have, again, financial and other resources along the way to have that luxury as well. So there are actual real practical considerations. Like, you are beholden to your kids. You do have to take care of your kids. You do have to do X, Y, and Z. But I think often even more than that, we hold ourselves back probably more than we have to out of fear.
Do you, when you're talking about this, I think of a path, right? And being like having the courage to follow the unknown path.
Absolutely.
But do you think that you have to have a certain amount of, I don't want to call it self-love, but like belief in yourself? Because when you were stuck, you were talking about like you went through a period of negative talk. I think in order to take that path, you have to like trust and like yourself well enough to go on that journey.
100%. I think
Right?
it's hard. By definition, it's hard to overcome the fear, to say, I can do this. I'm going to be okay. And I think the reality is most of us have that. I think probably everybody. Like, we're capable of so much more than we could ever possibly imagine, all of us. It's always like, I don't want to go to the gym. That's going to be too hard. Or I can't be that person. Like, all the things. Like, if you just go out and just jump, you will survive. You will figure it out. But yeah, it takes confidence. It takes a willingness to throw yourself into the unknown. And that's very hard. That's maybe one of the hardest things, period. And I think, I think it's not going to work out all the time, but that's okay. That's where you learn. That's where you grow. That's where you become stronger. That's where you find the opportunities and meet the person. And then the next thing works. So I think a combination of just not being scared, being willing to jump and to keep pursuing, to be somewhat uncompromising in that regard, and then picking yourself up when it inevitably fails and keep going. And that combination is like, will help you, I think, everybody fulfill, more who they want to be and where they want to be, no less.
Cem, this was an amazing conversation. One of the best yet. Thank you so much for sharing so much of your journey with the rest of us. So appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you for giving me a forum for it. I feel fortunate again to share. So
it was
thank
beautiful.
you, Maggie.
Thank you.